AI, it's good enough to deliver work to clients these days, but should we let it? How do you navigate the question of letting it do what it's capable of without jeopardizing the relationship, the client experience, without removing yourself too much from the work to where you're losing touch, right? Also today, how to get your codgerly old firm to start thinking more sustainably about how to run an accounting firm in a way that isn't going to run everyone into the ground. Couple tips for family firm buyers, and a few arguments for and against offering clients a single package versus your kind of 3-tier packages. Upsides and downsides to each. Come on in, let's talk about it. It's Q&A Friday. I'm convinced there's contexts where AI is actually good enough to deliver something directly to a client these days. And they maybe wouldn't know the difference, but maybe the better question there is it may not matter, because what AI can deliver is arguably as good as many accountants within very specific contexts. Not across all contexts, and definitely not in the most complex scenarios, but in situations where it can do it as well as a human can do it. Should we get out of the way? Are we being, like Luddites to say no, we need to do this thing that AI is capable of doing? I want to run you through a couple examples. This conversation came up on Twitter recently, but some examples of where I think it's absolutely capable of delivering the output, not doing the work, doing the write-up, but delivering it to a client. A couple examples. Something we did 9 months ago on the newsletter.jason.cpa, if you're not on it, was use AI to write a script to deliver a set of financial statements to the client. So every month, you've got that month-end close. You send the financials to the client somehow. Sometimes they look at them, sometimes they don't. In my firm, something we had great success with was recording videos going over those month-end closes and sending that to the client. The rules were it had to be 3 minutes or less, and you had to include a Calendly link if the client wanted to go deeper. And this was something that was pretty comfortable and pretty natural for me, but was not for my team because they weren't the video nerds that I was. They hadn't spent as much time on video. The other thing here was not all of our account managers had the same level of comfort extracting insights from a set of financials that I did. And that was something coming into it that I actually hadn't even really considered. I just assumed when everybody looks at a set of financials, they're going to kind of see the same things that I do. If they're an accountant anyway, they're going to look at the obvious stuff. But as we were talking about what should the process be to deliver these videos to clients, we realized we're all actually looking at very different things, many of which are useful, but there's value in standardizing that delivery, at least standardizing a base level version of that delivery. And one way you could do that these days is using AI to write a video delivery script for you. You provide it with the financial statements, and it writes a 3-minute or less script. And that's what you're going to sit there and deliver on video to the client. Now, could you deviate from that? You absolutely could. But this, I think, is a good example of where asking AI to just do a thing, it will almost never do it the way that you expect and the way that you want, as opposed to giving it super explicit instructions on how you want it to do that thing. So using this sort of AI financial statement delivery prompt as an example, this is what I prompt ChatGPT to do to write this script. I don't say, give me a 3-minute or less script to deliver a set of financials. I say, generate a 3-minute script I can read for a video I will include with the delivery of a set of financials I'm sending to my client. The script will talk over the balance sheet and then the profit and loss. Build out the script according to these instructions in this order. Income statement should be about 2/3 of the script. Look out for trends, significant month-over-month changes. If there are any payroll-related accounts, always point them out regardless of trend size. Any other outlier accounts, trends in net income, and reminders of how net income won't always be reflective of cash movement. And then for the balance sheet, always point out cash balances and relative changes, highlight changes in current liabilities, and then any other significant fluctuations. Use the attached financial statements to generate the script as described. And it does this really well. In this newsletter, there's basically a 4-paragraph example of the response and what it gives you in return. Sounds like a person and calls out more or less the same things from the financial statements that I would have called out. But the reason that I like this and the reason that it worked for me was because I got really explicit about exactly what I wanted it to call out and in which scenarios it should bring something up. So always point out payroll expenses, always point out current assets, current liabilities, cash, that sort of thing. When my team was delivering these financials, it was before AI and before ChatGPT and all that stuff. We had to build an SOP for what those video deliveries looked like and what specific things you called out in the balance sheet and the profit and loss. And it wasn't until we did that everybody kind of got on the same page and I could fully trust that delivery was what it needed to be. And it was a codification of, I don't know, the things that you may think are common sense, but only common sense to you because you've done it 100 times when these other people have not. Now, you could absolutely build the same thing with like a transmittal letter for a tax return, calling out all the to-dos. My gosh, those like canned letters out of the tax software, they're awful, right? They're not readable at all. The number of emails I sent that were just a regurgitation of those T letters in a way that was like more readable for a human of like, here's all the things you got to go do and helpful links. The letters the tax software generates are horrendous. So you could absolutely do the same thing for tax deliveries. But I think the bigger question is, should you? A framing of how to navigate the automation of work that I've always liked is it's generally a good idea to start a project with a human touch and end a project with a human touch. If you're looking for the most valuable, most important parts to insert a aspect of being relational and familiar with your client, do it when you're starting the project, like when you're catching up on like, hey, what's changed since we last talked, but then also do it at the end of the project to like leave them with, I don't know, a positive feeling. And I think this is probably what makes AI deliveries, like fully AI deliveries, probably a bad candidate for automation. Now, it's not to say that it can't support you and a human delivering it. This is a great example, this whole financial statement delivery script. It's actually a great example of AI helping you to be more effective as a human, as, you know, maybe a double check for the stuff that you were going to cover when you went through the financial statements on video, maybe a starting point. But I'll be honest, there's a part of me that just kind of thinks, if AI can do this, like why? Why am I getting into it at all? As much as I'm not in the camp of people who say like, AI will never replace all the things that I do because everybody will still want the human touch. I think there is a degree of this that is the case. I mean, absolutely everything that we do today, that we do right now, will be automated, will be replaced. Every single task, if you think about all the things that accountants do, it's an extremely diverse set of tasks. Every single task individually is on a path to extinction, either being eliminated or automated. That's the way it's always been. AI is only changing the pace of that. So every time somebody says, AI is never going to replace me because human this and that, it's kind of like, yeah, no, but like what you do, eventually it will be replaced. I think this is a case where the inertia of the way that we work today and the way that we interact with clients and how much we can trust AI is probably a place where the inertia gives us like a healthy level of hesitance to just go full in on that. If I tell my client tomorrow, Ben's no longer going to send you your financial statement deliveries, it's going to come from BenBot, I have to think almost all of my clients will be like, yeah, but I still want Ben's opinion. Even if it's augmented with AI, I would rather you have Ben send me what he thinks. So when it comes to the places where there should be a relational touch, because at the end of the day, if you're building a small firm, you're not going to win on software, on being the most productized solution. And you're not going to beat Intuit and Bench and the pilots of the world to build the most automated high-scale platform. So if we start going down that path, then we start having to take the same prices that those services do because we can't hold ourselves out as a higher level or more personal level of service. So while there's certain parts of service delivery that shouldn't be automated with AI, if we take these examples of how it's actually really good at following explicit instructions, then you start to think, well, how could we apply that to actually the write-up and how the work gets done? I think the future probably looks more like everything in the middle of that sandwich getting automated, and then the human at the end making sure everything's cool and doing delivery, and the human at the beginning taking everything in and making sure that we have everything that we need to then stuff that into the machine. And if I can actually tie this into another question somebody raised, how do we use AI? James Bohan asked, any tips on how to leverage AI to standardize services? I think if we put AI on rails and ask it to do very specific things, then it's much more helpful. If I just turn up to AI and I'm like, tell me how to standardize, I don't know that that's going to be particularly helpful, as opposed to if I turn up to an AI tool and I'm like, this data comes out of this system in this format and needs to go into this system into this other format every single month. Do that conversion for me, and I'm going to come back and bring you this report every single month. That's a great application of AI because it's very clear what the system is. Just like this little script writer is, we give it step-by-step instructions of exactly what we want, and it gives us pretty good output. But that's not possible until you get everybody to agree on what those steps ought to be. And so if in your firm, you can't even get people to commit to an SOP of here's the way that everything needs to be done, AI isn't going to solve for that. In order to actually put it to work and make use of it, you have to first systematize what you do and get really explicit about what it is that you sell. Today's episode is sponsored in part by LiveFlow. LiveFlow is an extension for your spreadsheet app, Excel, Google Sheets, whatever you use, that lets you pull live QuickBooks data from client files into your spreadsheet. So your spreadsheet had a baby with QuickBooks. Now, how can you use that? How about to get the client to quit sniffing around in QuickBooks where they don't belong, okay? Stop touching stuff. The moment they start fumbling around in there, you get concerned they're gonna break something. But also, they're absolutely hopeless when it comes to getting to the information that they actually need, which is why using LiveFlow to build like custom reporting, the stuff that your clients actually want to see in a concise view, super, super valuable. And as I've shared before, can actually take the pressure off of the month-end close as well. Because when I send those financials to my client, they're like, this is cool, I guess it means the work's done, but I've got no idea how to use this information. So instead, I'm gonna give them like a real-time set of reports that live inside of this spreadsheet. I give them access to the spreadsheet. I'm keeping them out of QuickBooks. They're not asking about the monthly financials. Everybody wins, right? Sounds like a home run to me. Learn more about LiveFlow, the link in the show notes. This episode is sponsored in part by Tech Guru. Gang, we live in confusing times. We've got artificial intelligence, all sorts of technological marvels happening all around us that we're very excited about. But how do we wade into this stuff responsibly? How do I know that I'm not giving up my Lucky Charms to just whatever new hot AI thing just cropped up? Gang, you need a team of smart, attractive, well-educated IT professionals that are on your side, because you got better things to do than fix Tina's laptop when it doesn't boot up on Thursday. You're better than that. Okay, Tech Guru's got everything you need to help your firm navigate what is a tricky time, you know? Boy, managing tech with even in an office, but across a remote team too, not fun. It's a lot of work. Tech Guru, they just work with accounting firms, so they know all the stinky old tools you gotta use if you're a tax firm. They know the weird cycles of your business, and they're learning from every other firm that they work with. And you know who's gonna benefit from that? You, okay? So go swipe the link in the show notes, schedule a call with them. You got nothing to lose, okay? That's Tech Guru. I was thinking about this a lot after we did the kind of the service library stuff last week. Was that last week? Yeah. The more granular you can get with that stuff, and the more in common with some flexibility, the things that you deliver are, the more useful AI is going to be. But for the firms that have not gone through the work of building a language around what it is that they do for their clients, man, that's going to be really, really hard to automate because every single thing that you do is ad hoc. It's all one-off, right? When in reality, 80% of what you're doing for them, you do for a bunch of other people. It's just like the frosting on the cake is a little bit different. So what is honestly right now disillusioning many people with AI is the same thing we struggle with human hires, is we don't give it clear expectations. We don't give it very explicit instructions, and then are annoyed when it doesn't come back and do that thing the exact same way that you would. We have this amazingly capable tool that is falling on its face due to our own kind of human constraints of not being able to agree on the right way to do something and make it turnkey. And there's loads of cases where it's really, really hard to make something a procedure when something's super complex and depends on a whole bunch of factors. But oftentimes the trap there is you take something like income tax prep and you're like, well, we have these scenarios where it's massively complex, but 90% of that process is not. It's the last 10%. I think we're gonna do an episode on this next week. I teased it last week, how in my tax firm, we struggled with tax returns that were 95% run-of-the-mill and not hard. And then they just had this one little challenging thing, and that would cause the tax return to go to your most senior technical person or the one person in your firm that can handle that technical thing. Well, they're actually going to spend 80% of their time on that project doing trivial things. But just because it has that one little last step that only they can do, like they end up doing the entire thing. How do you peel out those layers of work to get something as far as it can get in a more de-skilled way, where you're not totally reliant upon expertise for everything? Anyways, I often see the AI conversation go down the path of what can it do, and what can it do is a sliding scale based on how clear we are instructing it. Because what can it do usually actually means, will it do it the same way that I did? So you got a big spectrum there of specificity on how much firms have nailed down exactly how they do their work. But then there's this whole other conversation of what should we let AI do? And as long as you and I are positioned as, being a firm where you can interact with an actual human being and build a relationship with your accountant and that sort of thing, we're not going to be a super scale, super massive productized operation, then at least today, it sure doesn't feel like we should be taking humans out of that, delivery loop, even if AI is capable of it. But we should probably be using AI to augment that process to make humans as productive as possible. All right, couple other odds and ends from social this last week. This is from Mark Gassner. What are the first steps for an old-fashioned firm to transition to a sustainable path? Is it possible to get buy-in from the legacy partners? Oof. I know a lot of accountants out there, they can get totally plugged into this more progressive way of thinking about how to run a firm sustainably. They feel like they have 20/20 vision on all of the things that their partners are doing wrong. And it's not realistic to one day think you're going to snap your fingers and they'll be like, oh no, you are right. You were right all along. It's worth thinking about anytime you're approaching change management and trying to get buy-in from anyone. It's worth thinking about what led you to feeling the level of conviction that you have. Because that conviction, it's a product of the things that you've consumed and the conversations that you had. With some exceptions like, what's right, and some things that are kind of more about our personal beliefs and the ways that we're wired. When it comes more tactically to how do you run a business or run a firm the right way, you are a product of the things that you've consumed. And so when someone else hasn't consumed those same things, it's unrealistic to think that you will walk in one day and convince them overnight. I get convinced by things when I hear repeated success stories from people who have done it. I can come up with a cool idea, but it's not really until I hear from people like, we're doing it, and very specifically, these are the ways that it has helped us succeed. It's not until I see that being repeated that I can get excited about. And that's the stuff that then I look to really amplify and share with folks, because it seems like it's really working in the wild. And if those partners were in conversation with people who are finding success with this alternative path, it's just a matter of time before it becomes normal for them. We've talked about a bunch of different examples of this. Take the tax firm that's selling tax planning packages for $15,000. For most firms, that's absolutely unthinkable. If you're an accounting firm, that could be tech advising, a tech stack consulting engagement that pays you $15,000. If you've never done that before, that may feel unthinkable. But if you had a mastermind meeting once a week with 4 other firm owners who do that every single day, and that's normal for them, it's just a matter of time before that then becomes normal to you. So the best way you can hack the brains of your peers and your own brain, if you have the agency to drive this change through, is to surround yourselves with the people for whom the things you aspire to get to are the norm. You're drinking the same water that they are, you're hanging out every single day, that just becomes ingrained in you, because we are wired by what we consume and the people that we spend time with. And so as much as you could beat your head up against the wall and try to convince everybody of all of your great ideas, and it's not to say that you shouldn't try to do this and shouldn't spam them my videos and podcasts relentlessly, the thing that will push people more than anything else is generally going to be seeing success from other people who do what they do and who understand what it is to run an accounting firm. Anytime somebody that works for you comes to you with this killer idea, oftentimes there's this built-in level of this person's incentives aren't going to be the exact same as me, and they don't really understand what it's like and all the things that go into running a firm and all that. And so it's easy for a firm owner to be dismissive of things that the staff bring them as a result. The reality is everyone, even the firm owner, has blindness. I mean, talk about all the ways the firm owner is blind. The unrealistic, painful things that are asked of staff, the impact that has on their personal life, everybody in this whole process has mega blind spots. But for them to totally buy in, it is probably going to take them being connected with other people who are like them that are finding success with this. And the really hard thing is, with most people still being unwilling to collaborate with other firm owners and just they have this legacy mindset of I'm going to do my thing and that's it. It's not normal to talk with other people to do this stuff. For the people who are just doing that day by day, they're never going to be exposed to like better ways of doing things. Everything is literally up to, everything's an educated guess. I think this will be better, and it leads to these kind of baby steps that are meandering and very slow, as opposed to being like, what's like everybody doing out there? We've got the internet, we've got ways to communicate and like connect with folks who are not, software companies or salespeople who will give you unbiased, straightforward answers to questions. I grew by leaps and bounds as soon as I got access to people like that who would be transparent and tell me what works and what doesn't work. The better thing to turn people onto, more so than maybe a specific change, might just be getting them outside of that firm bubble. Because you have unbelievable tunnel vision when you go to work with the same people every day, the same clients, the same systems, and no perspective. The more you can get people to think bigger than your firm and look outside of what you have going on, the more their mind is opened to, there's actually 100 different ways that we could do this. And odds are we didn't just like stumble into the best one. So my best advice is probably more holistic along those lines. How do you open that person up to not needing to have all the best ideas and just building a network of other folks that do what they do? I should say a lot of people in my firm became much more open to that during COVID. When I was like bringing gold stuff back from tax Twitter around COVID relief and was just always super on top of things like in like this superhuman way where everybody in the firm is like, how do you know all these things? How is this possible? And I'm like, because like 1,000 other firms are doing the exact same thing as us, but everybody's doing it in a siloed way. Like you can't do that totally independent of everyone else and expect to get to the right answer yourself. And so if you look at a place like Twitter where that conversation was happening near real time, it was super, super valuable. And when folks in my firm saw that, they're like, okay, I can understand there actually is some merit there. Because the reality is for most people, social media is still a joke. And, if they walk up to a person at, a Thomson Reuters conference and they have a conversation with them, they'll be like, oh yeah, no, this is a sharp person. If that same person is on Twitter or saying something on social media, the perception is immediately like, oh, that must be a joke. That person doesn't know what they're saying. For most people, like that's still how anything that comes through social media is perceived. Today's episode is sponsored in part by the folks at Team Up who help you find talented accountants in the Philippines to join your team. Education break, common vernacular you hear when you're hiring offshore. BPO. What is a BPO? BPO is a business process outsourcing company. Basically a company that employs a bunch of folks offshore and then you hire the company to get part or all of those people's time. The appeal of a BPO is for folks that haven't done offshoring before. Sometimes this can feel like maybe a more comfy place to start. Can help you navigate, kind of cultural misunderstandings. Usually the BPO will do the actual recruiting and bring a bunch of folks to you. Some BPOs also sell you more like the product, the deliverable, not the time. So like buying tax returns or month-end closes instead of just having a person that works for you around the clock. But there's some downsides to BPOs as well. Namely, high ongoing fees. It's not uncommon for half of what you pay to the BPO to actually go to the BPO and the other half to go to the person. The BPO is usually gonna set the person's schedule as well who's working for you, so you lose a little bit of control. And if you ever wanted to leave the BPO, getting those staff to come with you and like getting them out of the BPO, in my experience, is virtually impossible. So you're kind of stuck with that BPO if you love the people that you have at the BPO. So upsides and downsides to BPOs. But if you want to do direct hiring, that's what today's sponsor Team Up does. They've got recruiters that'll find you awesome folks to join your team. You pay a one-time recruiting fee, but you don't pay anything after that. Those folks just work for you directly. There you go. Now you're a BPO expert. If you're looking to hire folks directly in the Philippines, check out Team Up, link down in the show notes. Chuck Bass, really love your content. Taking over my parents' 40-year-old CPA practice. Bless. And currently implementing many of the strategies you've outlined in your videos. Any advice for navigating change in a family business? Boy, that's a sticky one. There's so many family firms. It's just so common. Honestly, a lot of these I see go really, really well, and a lot of them I see go really bad. And the worst case scenario is you have parents who are like nearing end of life and you have this really hard, uncomfortable thing that's not about them and not about the relationship. It's about the business and the thing they've built and their legacy. And so I think it can be amazing. It can also be really, really hard. Not unlike any sort of transition from one owner to another. You got to put boundaries on it. How long are they going to stick around? So many people go into these deals saying like, oh, we'll see how it goes. And that's just a recipe for disaster. Because if these people are meddlers at all, what you are excited about and the direction that you're trying to take things may be completely at odds with the way they want to work and how they want things to be. And when you're coming into a situation like this, most of the time, the person that's on the way out has hired the entire team that's there. They've attracted all the clients that are there. So these are not, quote unquote, your people. And this can be improved by like bringing in your people. And that's probably my two main suggestions is get really explicit about how long those people are going to stick around. Even if that's a hard conversation to have and may feel rude or unappreciative or something like that, you just got to be super clear about the fact that like my vision for how to do this is different than yours. And if you're here indefinitely, that's probably going to be hard, not just for me, but for the rest of the team to know like, who do I answer to? So try to nail that down up front, but then don't be married with everyone you have, your whole team, the whole client base. The team and the client base that was right for your parents that you're buying out, without a question, will not be the same team and client base that's right for you. And that's fine. We talk about whether it's worthwhile to buy somebody else's firm when you're getting started. Oftentimes it is because that can be the cash flow that gets you going and like gets you out there being independent. And if in 5 years you've turned over that entire client list to something that's a better fit for you and more profitable and sustainable, that's great, right? Like, does that make those previous folks bad clients? Like, no, like they got you from A to B. So the clients and the staff can get you from A to B, but don't be afraid to pull in your own people who will have a different level of energy for the type of change that you want to go after. And be mindful of really hard political change where, you know, you've got people within a firm that would feel hard done by if you had to make the decision to let them go. Like coming into my firm, we had like a receptionist that had been there 45 years. And she was like everybody's grandma and everybody loved her. And she did not contribute to the business and like held us back in many ways. But I'm supposed to come in and be the person like was I even 30 at that point? I'm going to come in and do this. Like look out for that stuff too. Because that can be a really frustrating situation if you get a few years down the line and you still don't see a way out from that. I listened to it was a keynote actually from Gary Vee's annual conference where he talked with his brother and his dad, and they've all been in business together. And I'm honestly generally anti going into business with my family. I just don't want to complicate the relationship that way. But I don't know. It's one of those things that can like either be amazing and there's nothing else like it, or can transactionalize something that absolutely shouldn't be transactional, right? I would say whether your family can navigate that tactfully with the right priorities, like you're going to know that better than anybody else. And that's probably the biggest consideration here. Last one. This one came up as we were talking about packages last week in kind of the service library discussion. And what you present to a client in a proposal. Do you offer them a single option? Do you offer them several different sets of options like bronze, silver, gold, that sort of thing? This is a comment from Freedom Folio. I notice it takes longer to close deals with clients when we offer packaged services because I spend a lot of time explaining the differences between them. Some clients struggle to make choices or want to mix and match services, such as getting the silver package but adding personal tax planning. Our value pricing for personal tax plans also lengthens the conversation. I'm wondering if it would be more efficient to offer a custom-built package to shorten the sales process. And then Run a Business replied, there are a lot of believers that only one package should be offered and it's the perfect one for your client. Main pro for 3 levels is that some people always go premium, and when 3 exists, some people go in the middle. Eliminating choice will shorten sale, and if you get it wrong, could result in a missed sale. So some of the points Freedom Folio brings up is why I never went to fully boilerplate packages, because I think people generally are irritated at the notion of paying for something that they don't need or don't want. And as much as I can say I'm the advisor and I know what you need more than anybody else, at the end of the day, what I'm selling someone also has to be perceived as valuable to that person. So like the right answer there, I think is somewhere in between. For sure, downside of offering several options, analysis paralysis, particularly if there's no flexibility in those packages. If you show them bronze and silver and they want if they want silver augmented with one thing from gold, are you willing to do that? And then you end up doing something different for everybody. And if you don't, then you frustrate the client because they're not getting what they want and they don't want to pay for gold because they don't want all the other stuff in gold. Like we've all experienced a version of this that's super, super frustrating. But the downside of just offering one is I do think you actually miss out on money. In fact, most of the time when I was doing multiple option pricing proposals, I would use decoy pricing to steer them toward the one that I wanted them to get. So I would make one clearly best that was clearly best for them, and using relative pricing of the option below and the option above, lead them to the thing that they're like, oh, well, this is the best value, so I'm going to choose this. And that was the one that I wanted them to pick all along. Decoy pricing, by the way, super fascinating. If you haven't read up on that at all, just Google that. Some really interesting psychology around that. Pros and cons of every single one of these things. But these are kind of the reasons why I ended up on offering 3 packages at a time, but those not being like locked, totally fixed packages. The downside to doing that is, as you saw last week, as I, kind of took the veil off the service library approach, the downside to that is you end up with genuinely millions of possible different combinations of what you do for people. But I do think it's still manageable. Like if you have a way like we discussed to carve out the unique aspects of service delivery for every single client, we can still be standardized in how we deliver that work. Delivering unique combinations of things to a client is not as bad as delivering a unique thing to a client. Does that make sense? Let me say that again. Delivering a unique combination of things that you regularly do to a client, not as bad as delivering to a client things that you do for nobody else. That was the compromise that I landed on, was we will do a larger volume of different things for people, and I will do a unique combination of those things for a client. But I was walking away from doing more one-off things just for single clients. Now, the whole like 1 option versus 3 option things, is this the sort of thing that's going to make or break your firm? Like, no, it probably isn't. And somebody that's really good at 1 option is like, maybe that's the way to go for them. Somebody that's really good at 3 option decoy pricing and all that, like maybe that's the best for them. And in fact, even for certain clients, you could do this selectively because 3 options is probably going to work better for one client than 1 option for another client. But for me, 3 options gave me the most flexibility, and I feel like I was capturing the folks who are willing to pay a premium then as well. Because people like to be coy and not super clear about like how much will they actually pay to get this work done until it comes down to like putting down the credit card. Like oftentimes you don't know until you get to that finish line exactly how much they'll even pay. And so with multiple options, like you do get a little bit more flexibility in that regard. That's all I got for today. Thanks for the questions. Keep them coming. Drop them down in the comments. If you're listening on the podcast, in your podcast player, there will be a link to YouTube. Just fire up that YouTube video, drop a comment down below. It can be anonymous. And every Friday we tackle kind of the inside baseball questions like this that, I don't know, the sort of stuff that I always got stuck on when I was running my firm. And the sort of like fiddly things that you don't get in like the general content out there from your CPE provider or a software company and all the other people putting out content. Thanks for coming and hanging today and listening to my big sick nose. Oh, hopefully that goes away next week. I'll see you next time.